Hey guys, so I wanted to tell you about this story. So my boyfriend and I, Evan, we wanted to hike Katahdin, okay? Mount Katahdin. It's not very far away from my house. It's about an hour and a half. It's really famous. Mount Katahdin's not a large mountain, but it's the tallest in Maine. It's the biggest mountain we have in Maine, and Baxter State Park and Mount Katahdin's well known. So months ago, like probably way back in the winter time, we decided that we wanted to climb it in the summer. So we made plans for Evan to come up from his home and for a week, and one of the days we'd climb Katahdin. So we decided to go in June. It was probably maybe late June, so we had a pretty crazy winter, and some of the trails were still closed because there was snow and ice on them. So we wanted to go across the Knife's Edge, but since some of the trails were closed, one of them was closed, I think it was Dudley, because of a rock slide, and some of the other ones were closed just because of the snow. And so I'd made up this plan. I was like, we should cross Knife's Edge. It would be fun. I've never been across that way. I've hiked Katahdin one time when I was 13, and we were going to go across Knife's Edge that time, but we didn't because I think it was closed due to ice. So we decided that we were going to go park at Roaring Brook Campground, hike up Helon Taylor, go across Knife's Edge, and then we would go to the peak of Katahdin. And then we would come down Cathedral. That was the original plan, okay? So we get there, we parked at Roaring Brook Campground. Oh, by the way, on the way in, after we got through the gate, we saw a baby moose. It was so cute. It just kind of, ran across the road. But that was the only big wildlife we saw. So we started a hike. It was really nice at first. The weather was beautiful that day. We couldn't ask for a better day. Like, the skies were blue. It was just so perfect. I'd never been up that trail. The trail I had been up was Saddle. And I think we went up Saddle and came back down, and so it was pretty easy. But this one, Helon Taylor, it didn't look too hard, but it was a really nice hike. We actually made really good time getting up to the top of where Helon Taylor was. I can't remember what the peak was called on that one, but it was the one right before you go across Knife's Edge on that trail. So also the bugs were like really bad that day, and we were like dying. So honestly, they were like the thing I think that kept us moving the most. We were just pretty much like running our way up. So we finally get up to where we get across Knife's Edge, and I'd only seen like pictures and some videos online. I realized quite how frightening Knife's Edge was. It was long. I think it's like 1.3 miles, which may not seem like much, but it is when you have to like climb over rocks and things. So I was like, oh my gosh, Evan, like what have I gotten us into? And literally the first thing we had to do was climb down this cliff, and you were just about, it was like you were gonna fall. That's what it felt like. I was sliding on my butt the entire time down. I was terrified, and I was like, oh man, this is a horrible start. But once you start, it's really hard to like go back. So it's like you kind of gotta finish. And you can go from either direction, but we'd already made our way down that cliff, and I didn't want to go back up. It was terrifying because you went down the cliff into this like ravine, and then you'd climb up another cliff, and then you were kind of on the like typical traditional Knife's Edge that everyone thinks about. So basically, Knife's Edge is this narrow ridge on top of the mountain. It's very famous for being kind of like the blade of a knife, and that's why they call it that. And it's really scary when the wind is blowing across and you have only maybe a few feet of space before you would fall down. But it's not just like flat space, it's rocks, and it's very, very terrifying. So we made our way across it very slowly. We spent a long time sliding on our butts and things. I had my camera with me, so I don't have one of those clip things that people have that they use for hiking, so I just had it around my neck, so it was like constantly banging against rocks and things as climbing. I got all kinds of scuff marks from going to go down it with my camera, but it's okay. Battle scars. So ages go by, and by the time we got to the end of Knife's Edge, I was like, I'm glad we had this experience, but I'm never doing it again. It was so scary. My legs were like melting. They just felt, not melting as in hot. My legs were just so numb from all that climbing. I guess I wasn't like in good a shape as I thought I would be. So we get to the cross of Knife's Edge, and then I didn't realize that going up to the peak, it was just like huge boulders you had to climb up. It felt like 5 miles. It wasn't really that much, probably only a mile or two. But it was so much work. We just kept climbing and climbing and climbing, and it got really scary because it got steeper and steeper and steeper. It was just these big boulders. Some of them were loose. You'd step on them and they'd move. Or if you, the worst part was that if you fell down or tripped or anything, you were probably gonna fall and tumble over the side of the mountain and die. We kept asking people on the way up. We're like, hey, how's this cathedral? Because we couldn't go down Saddle, which is what normally people I think would go down because it's a pretty easy trail. But we were like, hey, what's it like going down Cathedral and stuff? Is it in good condition and things? And people were like, you're going down Cathedral? I was like, yeah. So as we progressively got up more, people kept telling us about how terrifying going up Cathedral was. Like, they're like, yeah, we went up Cathedral. Even the most experienced hikers that we met on the trail were like, you're going down Cathedral, good luck. And I was like, oh man, what have I gotten us into? Because at this point, we only had a few particular options. Okay? We could either go down Cathedral, which was, I think it's like this steep. But I didn't know this. I didn't know it wasn't something that people traditionally went down. People still go down it. But it's just like, we were exhausted and so we were already tired. And it's just not something people usually go down because it's hard and it's scary because it's steep and it's really rocky. And so I was like, wow, so what should we do? But another option would be to perhaps go down the back of the mountain, which I hear is what a fair amount of people do. The only problem with that is we parked at Roaring Brook Campground. Roaring Brook Campground is on the front of the mountain. And down the back, we would have had to somehow walk all the way around the mountain. It just wouldn't have been even feasible. And since Saddle was closed, we couldn't go down that one because that's the one next over from Cathedral. It would have been fine. It would have taken us to Chimney Pond Campground and then back to Roaring Brook. But the final option, which is the final option was a trail I didn't know about, and it's called Hamlin, where it goes around the whole entire. So you go around the whole basin of Katahdin, and you would go down. And I'd not researched it because it wasn't the trail I was thinking of going down. I didn't even know it existed, to be honest. I guess I didn't look that far. I don't know. I guess you live and learn. Well, anyway, we get to the top of the mountain and I'm like freaking out. I was like, Evan, what are we gonna do? We can't go down Cathedral because everyone just says it's terrible. And what if we just like slip and fall? And we're already really tired. Like our legs are just like awful. And we drinking the last amount of water we had, and we had no more food, and we were just kind of feeling like really tired. We just wanted to get down. And we got on top of the mountain later than we planned because Knives Edge took way longer than we thought. Man, if you're gonna go across Knives Edge, make sure you wear gloves. That's the one thing I recommend because it's really rocky, so if you're doing a lot of climbing, your hands will get really raw from it. I was wearing LL Bean trail pants, and they were fine, but I did get like a little put of a hole in them from sliding down the rocks so much. Also, make sure you bring enough water. We brought enough water for the amount of time we were supposed to go down, but we hadn't brought more than that. And so we met somebody on the top of the mountain. There was a group that took our picture, and they're like, yeah, you can just actually go around the basin and go down Hamlin if you don't want to go down Cathedral and you can't go down the back, or you could go across Knives Edge, which after thinking about all of it, Knives Edge probably would have been quicker than the route we took, but we decided to take Hamlin. So going down Hamlin was fine at first. We went down, the regular part of the basin and stuff, but it took forever to get to the peak where Hamlin was. And it was like, oh my gosh, we had to walk down a hill, then up a hill. I was like exhausted and tired because I wasn't in great shape. So I think I got like really cranky, and poor Evan, I just like he was so optimistic the whole time. I have to give it to him. He really was the thing that kept me going through that because we started to climb up the peak to where Hamlin was, and it just there was no peak for ages, and we were just tired, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I just didn't feel good. I think I was getting dehydrated, but we weren't even close to the bottom. So finally we get to the top of that, and we're like, okay, it should be pretty easy down, it's probably just like a slope, because that's what it looked like on the other side of the mountain. But we get there, and it's this like really rocky ridge of boulders that goes down and down and down. And so we start going down it because we really had no choice. There was no point in going back, and it had been it'd been more time than it should have. We started to go down. We were both just exhausted, absolutely exhausted. There was no water. The bugs were just awful. Again, they weren't bad once we got to the top of the mountain. Once we got to Knives Edge, they just disappeared. But when we got back to Hamlin, they just swarmed us, particularly me. I don't know why maybe it was my bright blue jacket, maybe that's what did it, but it was miserable because they just kept attacking me, and I had a headache, and I was just it was just insane. So we make our way down, and it goes on forever and ever. We just seem to be on top of the mountain. We didn't ever seem to get down more. we just went on and on and on, and I was like, oh my gosh, Evan, we're never getting off this mountain. We should just like lay here and sleep the night. Like, not really, but that's kind of like what I felt like. And so after hours, maybe it was a couple, 2 or 3 hours, we finally got down off that big ridge, but it was just constant because we were climbing over boulders, down and climbing over and going down, climbing up and going down, and it was exhausting. But we got to the bottom and we're like, wow, this is so nice, because finally we got to see flat ground. At this point it was a lot later in the day than it should have, and we're like, when are we gonna get back? And so we're just walking and walking. I think it was like 3 miles back to Chimney Pond. Not Chimney Pond, Roaring Brook. It was a little bit to Chimney Pond, and then we had to go back to Roaring Brook. But we were just walking along, and it never seemed to end. And you know, it was better, I guess, than climbing the mountain, because that was the worst part. But because we were walking on mostly flat ground, but it's just like, it went on forever. We had not had water in hours. It was hot out, and we were both like, it just wasn't a great situation. And so we kept walking and walking. I don't know why it took so long to walk 3 miles, but it did. It just went on for ages, and it actually started to get dark. My parents are gonna be worried that this is really bad, but we didn't have good phone service on the mountain. I don't even know how we went on. We were just too tired to go on, but we just did. It was kind of like survival instinct kicks in. We have to go. And it did get dark eventually. We had to use the flashlights on our phone, but the batteries were starting to go down, and we didn't bring another flashlight. This was on us. We didn't come prepared for this, but we also didn't expect this to happen, because I'd been on Katahdin before, and it was not like this at all. So we were just absolutely exhausted. And then we finally saw where the Roaring Brook campground was, and we're like, my gosh, we finally got there. It was like nighttime out, complete nighttime. And honestly, when we got in the car, it was 10 o'clock. We left that morning at 4 a.m. It takes an hour and a half to get there, so I think we started hiking at like 6 a.m., 7 a.m., probably 6. I don't know. No, we definitely started hiking at 6 a.m. And so we'd been there to 10, and we'd been hiking on that trail for 17 hours. But yeah, so that's our story about climbing Mount Katahdin. It's pretty gnarly, I'll admit. But we made it, we survived. We'd probably do it again, but we'd be more prepared. We wouldn't do it like that. I don't know anybody that's ever done the whole basin. Like, that's like not something that's not even a thing that people do. You would normally, if the trails had been open as normal, or we thought to go down, like have someone pick us up on the backside, it would have been okay. So, yeah. So that's our story. Thank you for listening, and I guess peace out.